Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Three Pathways for SDG Innovation, Thriving Cultures, Interdependent Mindset, and Lightheartedness. I'm Joni Carley. I represent Cosmos Associates here at the United Nations, and I'm the Unitive Cluster convener. This side event is about creating social innovation by creating exactly what we put in the title, Thriving Cultures, Interdependent Mindset, and Lightheartedness. Emerging science confirms what many religions, most religions and spiritual traditions have always taught us, that we are interdependently co-arising with everyone else on the planet and also with the planet itself. It turns out that Ubuntu is true. I am because of who we all are. The Unitive Cluster came together as a group of about 16 UN NGOs to work together on from the understanding that unity is not some far-off utopian aspiration. Unity is actually our existential reality. And the global recognition of how unified we are has never been a more critical understanding than right now. The Unitive Cluster focuses on our interlinkages by connecting scientific, as well as spiritual, ethical, and moral considerations with UN processes. Our interventions recognize that successful systems must necessarily account for the mutuality of our coexistence on the planet. But saying that unity is an existential truth sounds like the furthest thing from the truth right now as we look at the news and see what's going on in the world. And that's because our cultural norms don't accommodate the reality of our interdependence. Cultures are like cultures in a lab dish. They'll grow some things and they won't grow others. If our cultural norms include violence at every level of society, if they include debt and competition-based economies, and if they include systemic compromise of dignity and well-being, then it's because our cultures accommodate those things. So if we are to realize the SDGs, and if we are to live happy and well lives, we have to move beyond a project-based approach. If projects alone were enough, we would already be there. There are fabulous projects going on. We have to work at much deeper levels. We have to create the culture of peace. We have to flip the script and stop asking how we can create more safety in an unsafe world. We have to ask, how can we create a world where every being goes to bed safe, fed, and warm? How do we build on the strength of our diversity to act more in accordance with the reality of our interdependence? As we look at the systemic transformation that's on the agenda of the Summit of the Future, it's time to ask, how do we build systems around the reality that everybody wants to be happy and well? That's most people's bottom line. We have to ask questions like, why does joy seem like too much to ask for when the world has so much money for weaponry? How do we flip the script and make those things that make living great, make those the priority? How do we make human rights the center of policy and practice? For this side event, we're turning our eyes away from fixing problems for the moment, because the system is really hardwired for failure. And we're not asking during this session, how do we fix a very broken system? We're turning our attention instead toward considering the cultural transformation that's necessary for SDG fulfillment to be a natural outcome. How do we grow the culture like a culture in a lab dish? How do we grow the social culture so that SDGs naturally express? We identified 3 potential pathways for innovation for our subjects today, but I want to just address the word innovation before I lay out the program for you. Innovation necessarily means that it can't be something we consider realistic. If it was realistic within a system, that would just be some change. It wouldn't be really innovation. And we need true innovation for transformation. Transformation requires that we be innovative in how we construct our cultural norms going forward. We have to proactively construct new cultural norms. So we're going to start today with Daniel Perel. He's going to lay the foundation for us of what transformation means. And he's a representative of the Baha'i International Community's United Nations Office. He works on social and sustainable development. The data is clear. Culture is the most determinant factor of outcomes. Cultural and economic norms need to be accounted for and addressed as the determining factors that they are. Just like cultures are developed in lab dishes to accommodate some things and not others, human cultures accommodate the conditions for realizing SDGs or don't. And a culture of peace would both support and accomplish the SDGs. At this moment, we know we do not have the cultural constructs in place to accommodate SDG fulfillment. And so we need innovation at the cultural level. And so we'll look at that today with Dr. David Adams. Dr. Adams is an expert on cultures of war and cultures of peace. And he's the coordinator of Culture of Peace News Network. He writes a monthly blog. He retired in 2001 from UNESCO, where he was the director of the unit for the International Year of Culture of Peace. And after David, we'll hear some poetry from the Global Youth Poetry Slam from Mustafa Ali and Lady Caress. And we'll hear from UNDP representative Juliet Norman-Smith about their Happy Schools initiative. Juliet will be followed by Dr. Richard Cluxton, co-director of the Association of University Leaders for a Sustainable Future and a member of the National Council. He'll talk to us about expanding our metrics beyond measurements like He's going to talk about how we have to start measuring what really matters to us. You know, we know that people who cooperate and people who treat other people the way that they want to be treated, they do best in the long run. Yet our norms and our systems really support just the opposite. And we track and we measure things like GDP while we ignore the humanity that drives those numbers. New norms require not only new metrics, but they especially require new mindsets. And we wanted to put a focus on the role of mindset and heart set with Mitchell Rabin, who is the host of A Better World radio podcast and TV and founder and president and CEO of A Better World Foundation. Mitchell is also the president and CEO of UNItive NGO Institute of Global Education. Mitchell will talk about the integration of personal and cultural transformation and about the role of lightheartedness in our work. And our last guest, Steve Behrman, will end the first part of our program by taking us into the lightheartedness of comedy. He's an internationally known author, humorist, and workshop leader who for the past 33 years has written and performed as Swami Beyondananda, the cosmic comic. So we'll laugh together with Swami and then we'll talk. The second part of our program, we'll have two respondents, our intern Tara Lother and our Brahma Kumari representative, Sabita Gear. And that will kick us off into the last part of our session in dialogue. And so we begin with Dan.
Good afternoon, friends and colleagues. My name is Dan Perel. I serve as a representative for the Baha'i International Community's United Nations office. And I'm very grateful to Scott and others within the Unitive Cluster for inviting me to speak on this issue, which I think gets to the heart of today's theory of change, which is on win-win cultures, an interdependent mindset, and lightheartedness. As you know, I ensure that most of my interventions have some dimension of lightheartedness, but I'm not so sure how well it plays back. So forgive me for being less funny, perhaps, than usual. But let's start with this win-win cultures. And if I were to describe the theory of change under which most people seem to operate, it's that of protests, of advocacy, of, in fact, adversarialism, where my goal is to convince you of my idea so that you will do what I want in order to achieve the ends that I seek. And there is a degree to which that has achieved a lot of progress for humanity. Many of the most compelling ideas then rise to the top, and we're able to advance. However, there may be other ways of approaching this that recognize and actually benefit from the diversity of cultures and approaches and find new solutions, not even that which I'm thinking or which you're thinking, but that which can come about from my thinking integrated with yours and vice versa. And this kind of an approach is not what humanity is geared towards at the moment. If you look at our education systems, many of them are based on this idea that you have to grab an idea, hold on to it, defend it, don't change, be yourself. And I think that there is a validity to this. It is helpful in some circumstances, and yet it can also limit us. Imagine if everyone in the world were always taught to only hold on to what you believe in and don't change. Well, how would we learn? How would we grow as humanity? And I think that there's an inherent contradiction in this idea of the defense of your own idea with the need for us to be learning as humanity, especially given the number of challenges that we're facing today. So I think we need to shift that cultural mindset about how we make change. And I think the first lens through which we need to look at this new approach is through the lens of interdependence. This mindset would allow us to recognize that the bounded nature of identity, which historically has benefited humanity in many ways, but I think at this moment in history, we're encountering a bit of a challenge to that bounded nature, where we cannot conceive only of us in relation to them or inside and outside groups. We have to think of humanity as a whole, and in fact, humanity's relationship with the natural world as one organic whole. And this approach to modernity is actually vastly different. If you imagine throughout history, we've had different in-group and out-groupings, whether it's religion or language or culture or ethnicity, and even at the UN, if it's nation, all of this inside-outside structure has been helpful. But today, because of the interdependence of the world, we cannot conceive of governance of our actions solely as me versus you, us versus them. It has to be an unbounded and interdependent whole. And governance structures are not geared in that direction. Even our partisan politics, for example, pit one group against another based on ideology, at some point based on color, or based on these other concepts that are not reflective of humanity's interdependence. And I think this is a really important factor that we have to conceive of as we are trying to create new approaches to the world we live in. Finally, what I want to talk about with lightheartedness is that I often think about my daughters in terms of change. It's my role as a father, alongside my wife, to help our daughters to navigate the world we live in. And this requires a process of education and growth. And imagine if the way that we approached our daughters was through adversarialism and hostility and protest. I don't like what you're doing. You shouldn't behave this way. And we got all righteous, essentially, about how they should behave. I'm not sure that this would lead to the kind of change that we want to see. Most of the time when I imagine my daughters growing and changing and learning, it's through joy and smiles and this idea of wonder. Even when it comes to interpersonal dynamics, in addition to science and math and history, even interpersonal dynamics can be laced with this idea of wonder and joy. How much more is that the case at the United Nations or in any of our environments? When I'm speaking to you or you with me, if the conversation is founded on joy and mutual respect and happiness, wouldn't we be more likely to benefit, to learn, to want to work more with the other, to want to understand more? It sort of trades on that natural human tendency and aspiration for happiness and joy and well-being. And I think we do very serious work. And we should be serious about it, but we don't always have to be so serious that we can't find those moments of joy and growth. And I think if we approach each other in this way, if we approach our meetings in this way, I do suspect that we would find much greater outputs if we're less adversarial and more congenial, more joyful. And I think that's why these three items, this win-win culture, interdependence, and a lightheartedness, actually do come together in a very sophisticated and nuanced way. It's not just airy-fairy or happiness and songs. It's about really the well-being of humanity and ourselves. Our inner being shapes our outer being and vice versa. And I think that's what we're really trying to achieve in this meeting and through the Sustainable Development Goals as well. So I'll leave it at that, though I think there are a few other ideas that I would be happy to introduce at some future date. But thank you again for the opportunity to contribute, albeit distantly through a video. Thanks.
He recorded a second video that we're going to line up right now. He had an afterthought, so we're about ready to hear that. I'll take this moment while Tara is lining up the second video. Oh, are we ready? Okay, go ahead.
Now, there's one other idea I wanted to share, and sorry for coming back with another recording, but I think it's important in terms of interdependence. The UN proclaims that the SDGs are universal and interdependent. And I think that the latter idea I would agree with. The former, as they treat it, I think it is not quite as sophisticated as it should be. So what we have are 17 SDGs that apply equally to every country. So every country is judged by that same standard, which may, in a certain sense, seem like it's universal. However, not every country has a similar or the same standing at the international level. So one country's failure, so to speak, to meet its SDG commitment may be dependent on the activities or the lack of activities of another country. So if country X fails in its ability to eradicate poverty, it may actually be because of an unjust system at the international level. True universality would mean that if a country does not meet its SDG targets, within poverty eradication, for example, it is actually the shortcoming of the whole international order, because we are all complicit in an interdependent world in the success or failure of any country. And I think this is a type of universality that we have not yet achieved. If country X doesn't achieve the SDGs, we say that they are falling short, that they are unable to meet the commitments. But actually, maybe they're unable to, not for facts of their own shortcomings, but because of the shortcomings of the way that we understand SDG achievement and in fact understand universality and interdependence. And I think here's a very practical example of a shift in our notion of universality that could really benefit the international community and benefit all those countries that are struggling to meet the SDGs, which in fact is all countries. So perhaps this interconnected web is true universality rather than just a universal application of the same goals to every country.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing of any country's failures, every country's shortcoming, and recognizing the universality of the goals rather than the application in specific places. The web, is so critical. And that brings us to Dr. David Adams. David, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today and to look for some hope on the horizon of these troubled times. Indeed, we are faced with a horrible situation today. The world is devastated by wars, threatened with a World War III, suffering from poverty as the rich get richer, and yes, we need a profound change in our culture. To change our culture, we need to start with the individual, the family, the workplace, and the community. We got started with this during the International Year for the Culture of Peace to begin the 21st century in the year 2000. 75 million people, 1% of planet Earth, signed the Manifesto 2000. Here's what they signed. Manifesto 2000, because the year 2000 must be a new beginning, an opportunity to transform altogether the culture of war and violence into a culture of peace and nonviolence. And because this transformation demands the participation of each and every one of us, and must offer young people and future generation the values that can inspire them to shape a world based on justice, solidarity, liberty, dignity, harmony, and prosperity for all. Because the culture of peace can underpin sustainable development, environmental protection, and the well-being of each person. And because I am aware of my share of responsibility for the future of humanity, in particular to the children of today and tomorrow, recognizing my share of responsibility for the future of humanity, especially for today's children and those of future generations, I pledge in my daily life, in my family, my work, my community, my country, and my region, to, number one, respect the life and dignity of every person without discrimination or prejudice. 2, practice active nonviolence, rejecting violence in all its forms, physical, sexual, psychological, economic, and social, in particular towards the most deprived and vulnerable, such as children and adolescence. Number 3, share my time and material resources in a spirit of generosity to put an end to exclusion, injustice, and political and economic oppression. 4, defend freedom of expression and cultural diversity, giving preference always to dialogue and listening rather than fanaticism, defamation, and the rejection of others. 5, promote consumer behavior that is responsible and development practices that respect all forms of life and preserve the balance of nature on the planet. And finally, 6, contribute to the development of my community with the full participation of women and respect for democratic principles in order to create together new forms of solidarity. Well, that was the manifesto in the year 2000, but I think it is no less appropriate today. Please notice that those who signed did not promise to be happy. Instead, they promised to confront all forms of violence, whether physical, sexual, etc., to put an end to exclusion, injustice, and political and economic oppression, to reject fanaticism, defamation, and rejection of others, and to preserve the balance of nature on the planet. Well, I hope that my conclusion from this will not be a fly in the soup of your conference. But faced with all these problems, I don't think the appropriate response is happiness. Instead, I think it should be righteous indignation. This righteous indignation needs to be used as the psychological fuel for the concerted actions that can transform our culture from the culture of war to a culture of peace. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you so much. Righteous indignation. May we all carry that forward. That really is a motivating leverage point for us to say, no, the same old is not okay. We're indignant to it, and to make that stand. Thank you so much for raising that, David.
And greetings from UNESCO headquarters in Paris. Thank you to the Unitive Thematic Cluster for organizing this discussion on pathways for SDG innovation. Although we cannot be with you in person today, we're very grateful to be part of the dialogue on happiness and well-being as basis points for human and planetary health. At UNESCO, we believe in holistic development, and education is really central to realizing this vision for a more peaceful, sustainable future. And today I'll share an example that illustrates how lightheartedness and joy really should be at the core of our conception of quality education, not only to achieve SDG 4 on education, but indeed all SDGs that require greater empathy, innovation, and global solidarity to achieve. 10 years ago, UNESCO launched the Happy Schools initiative as a regional project from our Bangkok office. Since then, Happy Schools has become a global movement, which is much needed in today's society. We know that every parent wants their child to learn, thrive, and be happy in school. But many young people are spending much of their time in school bored, stressed, or bullied. Globally, 1 in 3 students is bullied at school each month. And recent OECD data show that digital devices are making students feel anxious and distracted at school. In addition, teachers face an increased workload, burnout, and stress, which is leading to high rates of attrition. We know that the world actually needs 44 million more teachers to fill the gaps and achieve SDG 4. Many students see school as a chore that they have to do, or a roadblock en route to a happy adult life in the future and after graduating and getting a job. But we really should stop believing that achievement, excellence, and rigor in schools cannot coexist with joy. Happiness and learning achievement can coexist, and indeed must coexist, if we are to address the current crises in both learning and well-being in young people today. And so this is really why UNESCO advocates for the Happy Schools initiative, which is a transformative approach to education policy. Our philosophy in a nutshell is that happy students learn better and keep learning, and happy teachers teach better and keep teaching. And this philosophy came about because we asked ourselves, how can we cultivate UNESCO's goal of lifelong learning if children don't want to go to school because of the stress and pressure to perform? It's not enough to just add a social emotional learning lesson or a mindfulness class here or there to solve the problem. To support and keep teachers and students happy and school leaders happy, we need system-wide alignment to cultivate happy schools. Last March, we released a global report entitled Why the World Needs Happy Schools, which presents a global framework to illustrate the key criteria of a happy school community through 12 criteria, which are organized into 4 different pillars: people, process, place, and principles. Within the people pillar, we're looking at supportive and collaborative relationships, physical and social emotional well-being, positive attitudes and attributes of all members of a school community. In the process pillar, we're looking at balanced and culturally relevant curricula, joyful and engaging pedagogies, and holistic and flexible assessment structures. Within the place pillar, we're looking at safe, healthy, and accessible and sustainable infrastructures, inclusive physical, digital, and hybrid spaces, and the use of school as a community center for learning within the wider environment. Finally, the principles pillar is focusing really on those core values that unite school communities and which should feed into the people, process, and place pillars. And these values are trust, inclusion, and empowerment. So these 12 criteria are intentionally high level. There's no universal model for happy schools. And so we really are encouraging schools and countries really to adapt this global framework into their local contexts. And we're delighted to see some champion countries doing just this. Vietnam, for example, is training thousands of teachers in the framework. In Portugal, school principals are using the framework to diagnose the happiness of their schools and create new catered models and policies to target the problem that was identified. And the Ministry of Education of Yemen just recently adopted a national framework for happy schools inspired by the UNESCO model. So today I want to end with the question really of, what does a happy school look like to you? How would you adapt the criteria? Why do you think that happy schools is important to achieving our vision and our goal of SDG 4, and indeed the wider agenda of a more sustainable and peaceful future? So UNESCO encourages everyone to adapt and adopt the framework and to start their own happy schools movement to prioritize joyful learning. Thank you very much and have a wonderful rest of the event.
Great to hear her talk about joy and how that has to coexist with all the rest of our efforts. And I think that goes back to what Dan was talking about with adversarialism. I think getting into these human responses like joy helps us move into the interdependence that we really need to move toward. And I think not just in education, but people, process, place, and principles are great 4 pillars to work with anyone, with any situation. Do we have the youth poems queued up? Are we ready to go with that?
She can't.
Okay. Oh, that's too bad. We will try to circulate. Tara, are you going to give that a shot?
We will try once more with the youth poems.
Peace is love. Peace is unity. Peace is respect. Peace is you and me. We only want peace.
Do not tell me about those gunshot and bomb blasts, the roaring sound of tanks that fail to think before launching a bang that causes more harm. They said the best way to start a conflict is for God to create a man with an empty stomach beside a man with a protruding belly. The touch of the wind on my skin makes me question my own existence, thus ending up asking myself this question: do dead people feel the touch of the wind or the whispers of peace? After all, I am but a messenger of peace. The whispers that stops you from being violent when you abuse for your skin, religion, or language. That is peace. Why the aggression? It's time for confession. How many souls have you led into the ocean of depression that often wash them away from the shores of peace? For peace should be our possession. No more question. Peace will be the motto of my generation. Peace is attainable, definable. Peace exists in you and me. Peace is not a buffalo that escapes into the thin air or a tear from a widow eye that can be held onto. Peace is here with us. I can feel his presence. Do you know why peace is running far away from our chaos? Because we ourselves have helped in diminishing and extinguishing its light. Peace is here, not there. When you board a plane, you don't inquire about the religion or the skin color of the pilot, for your aim is to land in peace, not pieces. What will you lose from loving another human or letting him wander on your streets? After all, the same red blood flows through your veins. Don't worry about the uniqueness in our skins. Just like the rainbow, we beautify the world with colors. For the prayers in Mecca and Jerusalem is peace. For white, black people is peace. Raise your hand if you are peace.
You see, they wanted us to tiptoe through the tulips. We said, no, we're going to footwork and move hips. See, our tiptoes be too swift. We two-step, then move quick. See, we be foundation. Like concrete in an open lot. Y'all dance was built off of what we brought, and we brought that realness, that grit, that grime. You call it urban, we say color can't be defined. Honey, we are melanin skin. We turn bland into current trend with a pop lock and a head spin. See, we know what it means to stand in the sunlight even though they be throwing shade. We have bled from red hearts and still came out like black spades, winning no matter the hand. Because in every hand, spades always trump. Put our feelings and emotions in protest, in crump, fist bump. Like Africa Bombada, we started breaking rules. Used hip-hop as our tool. Shout out to DJ Kool Herc for putting in work. Can I get a whoop whoop for the old school? We salute Sam, y'all, but that's boogaloo. You see, we roll Soul Train because our souls were in pain. But we do not vogue in vain. From our black, we whack. From New York to Camelback. Racism never ran this train off track, and we still kept it classy. Like Catherine Dunham. Modern dance never seen us coming. And we realized then that they may not like the color of our skin, but that our music and our movement is in every sector you're in. So when we step in the cipher, we don't hesitate. We dance away the anger so we don't harbor hate. And we learn through dance how to collaborate. And if we all did the same, y'all, we could make America great.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I love that first one. Peace, not pieces. That's really what it's about. The Unitive Cluster is about. Yeah, not doing it in pieces, but recognizing we are interdependently co-rising. We are one. And we'll move on now to really going into metrics with Dr. Rick Cluxton. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry I can't see you. I'm in the campground on Lake Superior in Wisconsin, and it's a beautiful place. So what I'm going to do is talk about getting beyond GDP. And one of the most promising developments in the ongoing UN policy debates leading to the future is the general recognition that we must develop better measures of progress than gross domestic product. Major efforts are underway now to include indicators of happiness, planetary well-being, in what they're calling dashboards, multiple measures to guide economic and social development. The UN's Beyond GDP policy brief states, and I quote, "In the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and our common agenda, it is recognized that a harmful anachronism exists at the heart of global policymaking. Namely, that our economic models and measurements overlook many aspects that sustain life and contribute to human well-being, while perversely placing disproportionate value on activities that deplete the planet, end quote. It's been a long journey to arrive at this recognition. As Kuznets pointed out, when first proposing GDP as a metric of national income in 1934, quote, the welfare of a nation can scarcely be inferred from a measurement of national income. Robert Kennedy's 1968 speech highlighted the many destructive aspects of using GDP as a measure of national progress. And he concludes by saying that GDP measures everything except that which makes life worthwhile. Short-term economic growth, as measured by GDP, is deeply ingrained in how progress is measured. If our nation's GDP declines, we enter a recession or a depression. And a major focus of fiscal policy is to stimulate sustained GDP growth at the national level. It's even in SDG 8. Fortunately, many are calling for developing and implementing alternative national indicators of welfare and well-being. Examples include the Happy Planet Index, OECD's Better Life Index, Bhutan's Gross National Happiness, Buen Vivir in Bolivia, Thailand's Genuine Prosperity Index, and of course, many more. Now, at last, creating a new bottom line for economic and social development has become a priority for the Summit of the Future. The latest zero draft of the Pact for the Future, in its Action 48, calls for the establishment of, quote, an independent, high-level expert group to develop recommendations for a limited number of country-owned and universally applicable indicators that go beyond GDP, end quote. Valuing what counts policy brief states that the framework to go beyond GDP should be designed to achieve three main objectives, and I'll read what those are. One, well-being and agency, putting the focus on people and promoting meaningful participation to ensure that decisions reflect people's needs and enable everyone to contribute to transformational change. Two, respect for life and the planet, safeguarding the planet and ensuring possibilities for life and well-being in the future. And three, reduce inequalities and greater solidarity, making efforts towards a more equal distribution of well-being. And the framework should also be based on three additional elements that pave the way for transformation. One is participatory governance and stronger institutions. Two is innovative and ethical economies. And three is from vulnerability to resilience. So going beyond GDP is a key to transformational change. And the fact that representatives of governments, businesses, and major civil society groups are making this a priority is a sign of hope in these often discouraging times. As we approach the Summit of the Future, one contribution we can make is to identify, develop, and promote indicators that an interdependent mindset would prioritize. This side event is emphasizing many of them, for example, happiness, lightheartedness, kinship. Our challenge is to find ways to bring these values into the ongoing debates over new metrics to guide economic and social development. I thought I'd conclude with a quote from the Earth Charter, which expresses some foundational sensibilities. It states, the spirit of human solidarity and kinship with all life is strengthened when we live with reverence for the mystery of being, gratitude for the gift of life, and humility regarding the human place in nature. So I would say that this movement to go beyond GDP is a great opportunity for us to bring exactly what we've been talking about here as foundational values and principles into the summit of the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Rick. I really like that quote that GDP measures everything except what makes life worthwhile.
Yeah.
We're really
1968, yeah.
Yeah, you know, and that brings me back to David's righteous indignation. How dare we not count for what makes life worthwhile? How dare we leave that out? You know, I mean, it's time to stand for that. We're going to move on now to Mitchell, who's going to help us get into that interdependent mindset to explore that territory, which is so often left out of the equation. We talk about consciousness as a part of what the Unitive Cluster focuses on. And the UN, that's often called mindset. It is, every social crisis is first and foremost a crisis of consciousness, because consciousness is the beginning of all. And so take us there.
Thank you, Joni, and such a pleasure to be here with everybody, and a real honor to speak to you all. Was that quote by Robert F. Kennedy about everything is measurable, but what's most important? Was that Robert F. Kennedy? He said that Rick said. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1968. Yeah.
I recommend that we start to listen to his son. See what he has to say about such things. He's getting more and more popular, but with less and less media. There's a lot to talk about here. We have been bringing up lots of really interesting subjects, and I kind of want to talk about them all, but I'll do my best in this short amount of time. Related to what Rick was just saying about going beyond GDP, I began thinking as I was listening to everybody speak that I wanted to call my little talk here, my mini talk or micro talk, it might actually be. It would be called The Idea of the Bottom Line Bottoming Out. It's another way of saying something somewhat similar, but a little more playful. And the spirit of play, honestly, as with humor, I think is what is sorely, severely, extremely missing in the environment of the UN. And that's why I think so little gets done on the level of actually establishing things that are dearest to our hearts and souls, like peace, addressing and really solving, I should say, global poverty and hunger. You know, when I look around the world, I see that people get along all the time. People on the streets of New York City, on buses, on subways, people are talking, people are laughing. School kids getting out of school, school kids in school. You know, I think it's great to have happy schools. And I love what I thought was originally the Bhutan Happiness Index. And I love to think that that has spread like a contagion. That's a healthy contagion around the world. If you're going to measure something, measure that. But I think that the subjective experience of people getting along on the ground, instead of a top down, a bottom up, well, that's different than a bottom line, but a bottom up, say, as in grassroots, is really where it's at. And I got to tell you, after years of spending time at the UN, which I really enjoy, by the way, even if I think it's fairly ineffective overall, which is why I'm very glad to be part of the Unitive Cluster to bring a little sense, common sense, and even, God willing, consciousness through lightness, play, and humor, by the way, to the UN body. We can really make a difference. I think that the way to really institute the change we want is really not with governments, but with people. As I survey, as I said, my years at the dealing with NGOs and the like at the UN, I see governments as actually the problem. All of a sudden, I feel like Ronald Reagan, you know, And I'm not in that class that would party at all. But there are certain things to be said. And I want to give credit where credit is due. There was a British anthropologist named David Wengrow who did a very interesting survey of history and civilizations. And one of the things he found was that there were several civilizations that existed without any leadership, without a ruler, without a king, without royalty, and without a president. And guess what? Everybody got along beautifully. They produced food, they shared it with each other, they made homes for each other, they did what needed to be done in a very practical way as a clan, as a family, as a community, and all went well. Think about that for a second. There were civilizations, human civilizations, that had no rulership, no king, and no government. Now, I just generally think that people love getting along and people love playing. In fact, when I was a college student, my professor in anthropology, even though I became a psychotherapist, I loved anthropology. He did a presentation on the anthropology of play among animals. And well, I don't have to tell you, guess what we are? And he found that animals loved playing when they had already eaten, when they had already slept, when they already had reproductive fun. They went out and, threw mud balls at each other and rolled in the dirt and, and pawed each other and all sorts of things like that. They also would clean each other. Well, I think that we can take a clue and a cue from that. I mean, what's better than biomimicry anyway? We're all animals, and but they really let themselves go with this without having governments. I mean, I've never heard of anyone in the animal kingdom or any group or species having a government. Yeah, they have certain hierarchies, that's true. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. They naturally emerge. But to formalize it and materialize it into something so concrete as a government is really something we ought to step back from and re-look at. I'm basically talking about a new paradigm, a whole new way of looking at our future. I know it sounds insane because governments have so made themselves known and everything operates out of government. And unfortunately, those governments are actually run by corporations. So at the end of all of this, my little spiel here is that underneath even governments are mega corporations, multinational corporations, and the things that keep them running is money. Nothing's wrong with that. But underneath that is greed, excess. And anything that is an excess is unhealthy. And that excess is I'm defining as a pathology. And there is an idea in Buddhist psychology called the hungry ghost. And that is all about someone who never feels they can get nourished. They can never have enough. And I'm suggesting that the people who are the head of our corporations and our governments are suffering from that malaise. And until we identify it as a pathology and deal with it and bring these people into a new 12-step program I've called GA. What does that stand for? Greed Anonymous. And that will give them a chance to get through this deep sense of unworthiness that, as a psychotherapist, I'm suggesting is at base of the destruction and the greed and the excess we're suffering from as a world. And with that curtailed, we can kind of get on with business and get on with our lives, enjoying, celebrating, loving, respecting, and just having a lot of fun and prosperity, by the way. I think my time is probably up. Is that so, Joni?
Yes.
So I'll let it go at that. But thank you so much for your attention. I put a couple of articles about what I'm saying into the chat if anybody's interested. So thanks again.
Thank you, Mitchell. And without further ado, we will go to Swami Beyondananda.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Hello. And first of all, I want to thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this Unitive Cluster. As you may know, I suffer from claustrophobia, but you've obviously created enough space for me to feel totally comfortable, because this group that I'm addressing is one of my favorite kinds of spiritual groups, non-dominational. Non-dominational. Now, in terms of happiness, happiness is not something that we get. Happiness is something that we give. So it goes around, comes around, and that's how we get happy. Okay? Now, according to this is our current world, the new word situation that we're facing. It has been said that crisis precipitates evolution. And if you look at all of the crises we are currently facing, you can see the chances of precipitation are about 100%. And what is the biggest crisis facing our race? It is a new concept, a new word. I call it eraseism. Eraseism is where one race is looking to erase another race. And the other race says, not if we erase your race first. And it's a race to the bottom that will lead to the whole human race getting erased. Mutually assured destruction. MAD, MAD for short. And that is why we have to learn to live like nomads. That is where I nomad at you, you nomad at me, and that way we will have no madness on the planet. We as a species are facing an existential crisis that will determine whether or not we continue to exist. Will we distinguish ourselves by stepping onto a new evolutionary playing field together, or extinguish ourselves on the devolutionary battlefield of one against the other? I'll put it bluntly. Either we will have an awakening or we will have a wake. Meanwhile, our body politic in this country and worldwide is one sick puppy. Not enough that we're suffering from irony deficiency, truth decay, and electile dysfunction. Well, we've now been diagnosed with bipolar insanity, and that's where each side does everything it can to destroy the other, and both sides succeed. Now that's equality. Partisan activists have been springing into action. No more passively rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. No, sir. No, now the two sides are throwing the deck chairs at one another. Well, fortunately, there's another side to the story. Maybe this whole idea of sides needs to be thrown over the side. I say there are no sides, only angles. And when we see it from the right angle, we're all on the same side. When it comes to politics, we've been of two minds, and now we have to be of one heart. Yes, instead of the old tug of war that pulls us apart, we need to have a tug of peace where we all pull together in the same direction. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Swami is proposing a sane world. He must be crazy. Well, maybe it's time for us to go sane together by committing ourselves to a sane asylum, to cultivate a sane and sacred center in ourselves, in our lives, in our community, and in the world. Because if we are to address problems like climate change, first we have to begin with political climate change. Warmer hearts and cooler heads. Yes, the time for revolutionary uprising is over. Revolutions just keep us revolving on the same hamster wheel of misfortune, the merry-go-round, and that is a death spiral for our species. What we need is an evolutionary upwising, where we humans wise to the occasion, step off the lose-lose battlefield and onto the win-win playing field. And that's why I'm calling for a shift from the fear-based state of emergency, where we hunker in the bunker with our own tribe, to a love-based state of emerge and see, where we emerge from the illusion of separation and see we are all in this together. I call this a great upwising and offer a simple 4-step program, mathematically guaranteed to work 3 times faster than 12-step. 4 simple steps: wake up, wise up, grow up, and show up. Wake up to the illusion of separation. We've been hoodwinked by a bunch of winking hoods. Our commonwealth has been hijacked by a small percentage of the uncommonly wealthy. Well, now it's time for we, the people of the world, to hijack the system, to hijack it, and turn divide and rule to unite and thrive. Second step is wise up. Wise up to the power of loving coherence. We're all one with the same one, the universal oneness. The universe has us surrounded. Might as well surrender. Surrender to the power of love. That is our choice in every moment. Love or fear. And I have really, really great news. Love is more powerful than fear. Otherwise, we'd be singing, all you need is fear, right? Now, we're not singing that. So if you're worried about the deep state, don't worry. The way to deal with the deep state is to cultivate a deeper state. And that is how we will make Goliath down. The only way to overgrow Big Brother is through bigger brotherhood and sisterhood and all forms of loving one anotherhood that includes every other in the hood, right? Okay, next step, third step, grow up from children of God to adults of good. See, we've been stuck in this awkward phase called adolescence. Adolescence. Our essence has been addled by misguided belief systems, BS for short. Remember, truth lives in the heart, beliefs lie in your head. So if you want to stop all of that lying in our heads, listen to your heart. Remember, the more we expand our hearts, the less we will need to shrink our heads. Final step, fourth step, show up. Show up on a new playing field where we gather all good intentions under one big intent, intentional mutual benefit. Where we all rise above and we rise above the identity issues that divide us and focus on the identical issues that unite us. Clean air, clean water, clean food, and clean government. All of you folks who've been cultivating inner peace all these years, time to let it out and declare all out peace. And to all of the warring parties and tribes on the planet, I offer this message. A pax on all your houses. A pax on all your houses. Now, above all, we must have compassion. Even for that candidate you're voting against, remember, behind every soulless heel, there's an unhealed soul. And through the power of love, we can not only heal souls, but we can re-soul heals. Now, finally, I'm going to ask you to take an all-important fifth step to make sure that you don't take the other four steps too seriously. Take a vow of levity. Take a vow of levity. Because we are faced with a cosmic comic paradox. The world is in serious condition, and yet there's definitely something funny going on. Yes, an unassailable fact of physics. Gravity is a downer, but levity lifts you up. So if you want to uplift humanity, begin by uplifting the corners of your mouth like this. This is called the levitational pull. And if you walk around like this, you will not have to receive happiness. You will be giving happiness as you address people, as you be around people all the time. It'll help you laugh, even when there's nothing to laugh about. So, let's face it, we humans have had lived for millennia under the rule of the lowest common denominator. And the golden rule has been overruled by the rule of gold, which is do unto others before they can do unto you. This has left humanity with a lot of residue to metabolize. And that raises the question, can we undo the do-do that has been done, or will the done do-do be our undoing? Well, it is up to you and me and all of us together. I invite you to play a new game on a new field, thrival, beyond survival, thrival for each and all. It is time to wise and shine. This is Swami Byandananda. Namaste. And I must go. Goodbye.
Thank you so much, Swami. I love the resituating onto thrival. And I love the great wising up. That's certainly what we're here to support, is the great wising up. And that reminds me of a story of Native Americans when they were trading among tribes. They didn't speak the same language, so they had a sign language. And they had a word for wisdom, which I think is really interesting right there. Like, imagine if we had to have a word for wisdom in international trade right now, how much that might change things. But they needed that in their system. And the sign for wisdom was to touch the heart and touch the hand, the head, and bring them together. And so, so often, as with GDP, we're measuring all these head things, but we're leaving out the heart. And so that's what we're standing for now, is bringing the wholeness of our human condition. And with that, we will go to our first respondent, who is our intern, our amazing intern, Tara Lothar. Thank you, Swami.
Hello, all. My name's Tara. I'm the intern for the Unitive Cluster. The Unitive Cluster connects scientific, cultural, and spiritual aspects of UN processes. And as an aspiring doctor, I can appreciate the views of science, culture, and spirituality as lenses through which we view the world. Joni said that we have to move past our project-based approach, which is what we have been doing at the Unitive Cluster. From the ground up, we started with building our norms, and we have this time to create relationship-centered work. Dr. David Adams said to change our culture, we have to start with the family, the workplace, and the community. Through the lens of medicine, we have relationship-centered care and we have patient-centered care. And in order to care for the patient, or our SDG, we have to consider the relationships that surround that SDG. At the center of care, we have to consider those relationships. Rick Clugston stated that we have to have other indicators besides GDP to indicate national progress. Our economic models have the potential to contribute to a more unified model of national progress. We consider access to education, mortality rates, maternal mortality rates, literacy rates, and multidimensional poverty measure. These measures can emphasize the need to consider quality of life in the context of economic growth. Between the two extremes of righteous indignation and happiness, I encourage us to look for compassion. I loved Steve's sentiment that we have to look for compassion and love. Compassion is a powerful force for creating a supportive and empathetic international community. And through empathy, we can foster these deeper connections and understanding. Thank you.
Savita is our second respondent, and then we'll open up the floor for conversation.
Hi, everyone here in the room and those online. I'm Savita, representing the Brahma Kumaris, and I really like this topic for many, many reasons. As I'm reflecting upon what our speaker said earlier, everybody was so great, especially as, of course, Swami, who wrapped it up so beautifully with those wonderful analogies and expressions and brought it all together so nicely. But here we are looking at some resilient and innovative solutions, sustainable solutions to eradicate poverty. And we're all talking about a paradigm shift, doing things differently, an interdependent mindsets. And I would like to share a little story, a true story about how a shift in mindset can bring about a shift in the poverty or the feeling of poverty. Many years ago, in the establishment of the Brahma Kumaris in India, there was a period of time when the inmates had like very little resources, like very little. And the concern was almost every day, where will the next meal come from? And there were a number of young ones in that group, and they recognized what was happening in the organization. And what they did was they would go into the forest, because the woods weren't very far from where the headquarters was located, and they would pick berries and fruits and eat and fill their stomachs. And they would come back and tell our founder father that, Father, we are fine. We don't need anything, and this went on for some time, whatever little food was available, but they would go into the forest and they would just be there and enjoy and eat the fruits, and they're quite happy. So they didn't allow the poverty to overcome their hearts and their minds and to start thinking, oh, we are poor, what's going to happen to us, whatever. But they did something, they shifted something inside themselves that brought about joy and love for everything, for themselves, for nature, for their family. And I have a feeling that it is that type of shift that they brought about within themselves, that they did not allow that energy louder. They didn't allow that energy to overcome them, that brought about the shift, not only in their lives, but in the entire organization, that today those young ones actually became the leaders of the Brahma Kumaris, that led the Brahma Kumaris to this huge expansion what we have today. And it's a classic example of how shifts within our minds, that paradigm shift, that consciousness, that thing that we work from the inner level. When we shift things inside ourselves, we can shift so many things around us. And not just poverty, but anything, any area of our life. I just want to share that story because it's a real one. And we hear this story every so often in our organization about how a change of consciousness can change things, not only for you, but for the entire world. My concern is, we all know this, we who are here in this room and online, and many of our friends who are not here, we know this, right? We probably are living it. How do we get this message across to the rest of the world, including those who are the policy makers and at the UN, etc. And lastly, I would just like to add to, that in order to help those in poverty, just before this program today, we had another meeting, and this concept came up, or this reminder came to me. Somebody mentioned it is better to teach a man, woman, to fish rather than give him fish to eat. In other words, help to provide, and this is what this guy does. He provides jobs for those who don't have, regardless, so that they can earn an income and help them to come out of poverty. So I would like to close with that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Do we have questions, comments? Those of you online, if you can use the hand raising, David Wick.
Greetings, just delighted to be here. I'm here representing Pathways to Peace, longtime NGO. And the shift, just putting a couple of pieces together, the angle of perception, is, as the Swami had mentioned, is critical because that's a shift in consciousness, which is what the Unitive Cluster is about in bringing this forward. And I'm wondering, as you do that, and absolutely, the importance of righteous indignation, which is a motivator for action, moving to action, not just sitting in the stewing, but moving to action. And also then the angle of perception is also the lighter side, being able to see a bigger picture. And I'm just wondering about the shift in angle of perception and what we're doing here today, and exactly what you're saying, Savita, how this moves, how we move the thinking forward around shifting, even just the consideration of shifting perception and how that is done. And I'm just wondering if any of our speakers have a thought about that in terms of making a shift of perception that influences the righteous indignation and the lighter side.
David Adams, let's throw that to you. Your mic is muted, Dave. There we go.
Well, I just put something on the chat. At a certain point, I wrote a book when I was at the university as a professor of psychology called Psychology for Peace Activists, which was based on the autobiographies of 20 great peace activists. And one thing that they all agreed with, whether it was Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King or various others, was that what motivated them into action was when they got fed up with the injustice that they were facing. But then going beyond that, it's not enough just to take action either. One needs to find others to work with and to affiliate and to grow a movement together. And this is a lifelong business. You cannot do it in a day. And people need to stick with it through the seasons, through the winters of despair, and then to the springs of hope. And finally, one needs the global picture. One needs to understand this interdependence that you're talking about, which is so important, that we are all interdependent. I hope this is useful.
Very much so. Yes. Other thoughts, comments?
I'd like to bring a thought that I had when we were talking about interdependency and in the context of the SDGs and the idea that your success is my success, your failure is my failure, global south, global north, and reminded me of this practice, which is a Buddhist practice, the concept of mudita. Mudita is the other side of the coin of compassion. Compassion is your pain is my pain, and mudita is like your success is my success. And if we could start nurturing between countries as well, not only what is missing in achieving the SDGs, but the little successes of the SDGs and nurture this, I think it's a change, because we have this, SDG is not working, and another, convergence of multiple crises within the UN that we repack and we put MDGs, and the SDGs is not going to work. So the mindset that creates the framework that we need to advance already carries that, it's not going to be successful. We shift this and say, every advance is my advance. Every country that does a little bit of shift, I think we can really start experiencing interdependency from a regenerative perspective, which means bringing more life, more vitality, more viability, which is vitality over time in the system that we are co-creating.
Yes, I love that. It's about flipping the script. It's about highlighting the successes and stopping the
mudita. Your success is my success.
Because something like that creates an enthusiasm. Something like that consciousness, right? My success is your success, creates an enthusiasm that will motivate me to continue doing what we're doing.
Correct, because I think problem solving is about looking backwards and looking at potential, where realization is looking forward. And if we are ready, gearing ourselves for the summit of the future should be, celebrating the success of one another. Not only my success, look, I myself with my VNR, look at my country, what we're doing. Yes, it's great, but do we really celebrate each other's beyond diplomatic? Can we start infusing this conversation between delegations of practicing mudita?
Truly transformative. Yes.
I'm a Rotarian, Rotary Action Group for Peace, and I know there's a few other Rotarians online. But one of the things that being a Rotarian or just a person is life is hard. Life is unfair. The thing is, and also within Rotary and everything else, we're lucky. We're very to be grateful. And the thing is, one of the things about Rotary, our motto is service above self, is really giving back. And one of the things that I think everything that I've heard today really fits in with what Rotary or we're trying to do. One, I think two things I'll just bring up. One is peace through service, helping people with whatever they need in the sense of be it health, be it food, be it poverty, help out and trying to make people's lives better. And the other thing, which I think why I came to this meeting with all the UN things, is about the lightheartedness. Is really, in a sense, and also what we're trying to do within our Rotary, within our district, is we have a thing called Opus for Peace. It's really bringing in the arts for peace and bringing in the fusion of arts, getting people together, and for this whole idea of peace. And also the fact that I think we need fun, and I think it was brought up, is the fact that the UN isn't fun enough. And people aren't, when they're not having fun, they're not smiling, which I think is very important because Mother Teresa says, right, peace begins with a smile. And every time you see a smile, people look better when they smile. People are happier when people smile. And so I think that's the thing. It's really, in a sense, those two things. Really, it's peace through our service that we're doing for other people, and also generating the kind of fun and interesting things that we can put together. And I think that's a step. And I love the Swami, whatever. And I need to talk to you more because I need to understand some of your things. And one of the things that also, the thing is, everybody says, peace starts with me inside. I love it, the fact that you said, get it out, get it out. Inner peace, get an outer peace. And I think that's the thing, we have to get it out. And so I really appreciate what everybody's been saying, and this group is terrific, and love you all.
Thank you. Hezekiah.
Yes, I'm just going to piggyback on what Dennis said, because I am a true advocate for lightheartedness. And I feel that lightheartedness is an important tool for us as peace builders, because the work that we're doing can be difficult, as everyone knows and everyone has said. And yet to know that I have a choice to bring a light heart into that, for me, changes the outcome of my work. And it's also, the task is its own reward, because it is good self-care as well. So especially when I'm doing work where there's a lot of difficulty, potential conflict, choosing to come in with a light heart changes the energetic field and allows us to, often I've noticed, allows us to transcend those differences and come together in our common humanity. And so I think whenever we're just pulled into that dense seriousness with everything that's going on, if we join that, it just accelerates it. If we bring a light heart, then we can lift it and lift that energy for all. So I'm, as I said, an advocate for lightheartedness, and I employ that tool in my own life and in my own work. And we have to recognize it's a choice. And then when we choose it, we can bring it in. So thank you.
Thank you, Taz. I think that's a great note to end on. We have one speaker still with us. I'll just ask David Adams if you have anything else you'd like to add as we wind up.
Well, something I should have mentioned earlier with regard to the year 2000 and the Manifesto 2000, almost half of the 75 million signatures were gathered by Brahma Kumaris in India and Nepal. I visited them in India and was just very impressed by the work that they did. And if we could pick up once again where we were in the year 2000 with organizations like Brahma Kumaris, also Baha'i was very involved, helping us to once again get people to commit to the kind of engagement of the manifesto, maybe we could move forward again.
At the Unitive Cluster, we really want to continue that conversation with you, Dr. Adams. We think your work on culture of peace and those kinds of distinctions are really critical and integral to the work that we're doing going forward. So we appreciate Mitchell bringing you to, or David Wick bringing you to us. And this is the beginning of something good. Yep. And to be continued for sure. And one of the ways that will continue is the Unitive Cluster has made a decision to do a program on culture of peace. And the UN celebrates that in September, but we don't feel like we have the bandwidth to do it justice in September. And so we decided to do something in October, early November, and to do something much more substantive, some kind of symposia or something like that on culture of peace. Remains to be seen. And so we will end this and go into a cluster meeting. Sabita, you have one more thing?
I just want to say something that I remembered. The UN has declared 11th of June 2024 for the first time International Day of Play. I just thought that you all might be interested in hearing that.
Great. So I want to thank Dan Perel, David Adams, our youth who read the poems, UNESCO Happy Schools, Rick Clugston, Mitchell Rabin, Steve Behrman, Swami Dayandananda, Tara Lothar, and Sabita Gear. And bring this to a close, and we'll give a couple minutes break. And those of you who are part of the Unitive Cluster will go into a very short business meeting. The second Friday of every month, first Friday of every month. Second Friday of every month is our Unitive Cluster meeting. Anyone who holds a badge and is on the ground at the UN, whether virtually on the ground or physically on the ground, is welcome to be a member of the cluster. And Tara, if you could put the email address in the chat, please contact us. We're happy to bring you along. And we'll allow those of you who have joined us, we thank you for being here. We glad you found us. And if you are a part of the cluster, we'll take a very quick break and then we'll have a very quick meeting. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Great.